Logan.
Evening, everyone. Welcome to the Concord Heights Board of Education meeting on June the 11th, 2025. Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mr. Dobbins.
Here.
Ms. Prouse.
Here.
Mr. Suchaki.
Here, 3 present, 2 absent. Ms. Decker will not be joining us this evening. She is out of town, and Mrs. Etter is planning to be here in about 15 minutes or so. On behalf of the board, I would like to welcome all parents, staff, students, and interested community members to tonight's Board of Education meeting. Board values and encourages public comment. Anyone having an interest in the action of the board may participate during public comments portion. A copy of the board agenda is available for review on the website, and we ask that you stand to your cell phones during the meeting. Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I just realized my microphone wasn't on, so I don't know how much of that got picked up or not. Okay, at this point, I'll accept the motion for the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Dobbins, second by Ms. Proust. Any discussion? Hearing none, Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mr. Dobbins.
Aye.
Ms. Prouse.
Aye.
Mr. Suchaki.
Aye, motion passes 3-0. Comments from the public, there's no one here. Moving on to Treasurer's business. Mr. Muccio.
Thank you, Mr. Suchaki. Just a few items tonight for approval. I ask for items 4A and 5A for tonight.
Okay. Approval of minutes and purchases over 5,000. Any, may I have a motion for those 2 items, please?
Second.
Ms. Proust,
Second.
second by Mr. Dobbins. Discussion.
If we look at 5A, our purchase orders over 5,000, we click on our lead sheet. The 8 that we have in front of us are all for next fiscal year, fiscal 26, which begins 7/1. These are all our blanket purchase orders, so we're starting to put those out there. We're going to have a lot more for the second meeting in June. The first one is our general legal services with Enos Britton, a blanket of 45,000. The second one is tax legal services with Brinson McIntyre and Seed. That's 40,000 blanket. Third one is illuminating company. That's for our electric utility, $185,000 blanket purchase order. Our fourth one is the division of water. That's for our water utility. That's a $40,000 blanket purchase order. Number 5 is the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District. That's for our sewer utility. That's a blanket of $90,000. Number 6, Enbridge Gas, Ohio. That's for our natural gas transportation blanket purchase order in the amount of $30,000. Number 7 is Ohio Schools Council. That's for our natural gas. The actual gas, the other one's for the transportation of it. For the actual gas, that's $80,000 for a blanket purchase order. And the last one is Ohio Schools Council. We take part in the legal hotline with Enos Britton, and we get a reduced rate for the max, and that is $5,000 for approximately 20 hours that they have for blanket purchase order. And those are the items I have for approval for tonight.
Okay. Any questions for the treasurer? Other discussion? Hearing none, treasurer, please call the roll.
Ms. Prouse?
Aye.
Mr. Dobbins?
Aye.
Mr. Suchaki?
Aye, motion passes 3-0. Treasurer's discussion and comments, section 7.
Yep, a couple for tonight. First one is A, so that's just a reminder on the items for the Budget Commission as we get close to fiscal year end. I keep it here just so it's on my radar. And then we're going to talk about a couple House bills that are out there. The first one is House Bill 335, and I'll read what I have down there. So that HB House Bill 335 is a sweeping property tax reform bill that removes the ability to levy inside millage and combines elements from several prior proposals, HB 129, HB 186, and HB 309. It would fundamentally change how property taxes are levied, limited, and allocated in Ohio with devastating implications for public school districts. This bill could be folded into the final version of the fiscal 26-27 state budget. So, does HB 335 eliminate inside millage for schools? Yes. HB 335 removes the authority for school districts and other local governments to levy unvoted, which is inside millage. Is there any offset or reimbursement for the lost revenue? No. HB 335 does not provide a state offset to replace lost local revenue from any of the changes in the bill. What services could be cut? Districts may need to revert to meeting only the state's minimum operating standards as a result. And I have an estimate down here of the inside millage dollars for other school districts nearby. So for Brecksville Broadview Heights schools, it's approximately $7.5 million. For Brooklyn schools, it's approximately $2 million. For us, Cuyahoga Heights schools, it's approximately $2 million. Fairview Park schools, $2.8 million. Garfield Heights schools, $2.7 million. Independence, approximately $3.8 million. Parma schools, $17 million. Strongsville, $13 million, and Westlake schools, $12.7 million. All public schools in Ohio, it's approximately $2 billion worth of inside millage. There's an FAQ that was put out. So what that means is the state constitution provided 10 mills for public entities to essentially start up, so they didn't have to go to the voters for a levy. So they had startup cash. And of that 10 mills that was allocated, schools got a portion, villages get a portion of that. Our portion is 4.1, and that's been that way for many, many, many years that we have. And our 4.1 generates approximately $2 million. So what this proposal, HB 335, would do is it would take that $2 million that's given to us by the Constitution, provided to the schools, and it would take it away. So we would have to either make do without $2 million in our budget or potentially go for a levy to make up that $2 million that would be gone.
I guess at first I thought it was like converting inside millage to whatever the other thing is called.
Outside millage.
Outside millage, and so it would be effective the way that outside millage is, but it's not, it's completely taking it away.
That's,
Which also, the other one is also bad.
that's what it appears to be. Matt, did you want to add anything to that one?
Yeah, it doesn't just affect the school, it would also affect village services, and we have 3 villages. That would, yeah, so it wouldn't just affect us in this school district, it would affect our 3 village governments as well, with nothing to replace it. And keep in mind, we already have the tangible personal property tax phase out, that we're losing $230,000 a year, and we've lost $16 million total dollars since that phase out started with no replacement.
And let's take a look at the next House bill that's been proposed. So that's going to be letter C. This came today in an email from our legal counsel. So this is House Bill HB 355. So HB 355 was introduced today in the Ohio House to increase the approval threshold for passage of a voted tax from 50% to 60%. This applies to both property and income tax issues. The bill does not provide for an effective date for elections after January 1st, 2026. The legislation, if enacted, presumably would not impact elections in November of 2025, yet further clarification will be needed. So essentially what that appears to be is if we lose our inside millage, the $2 million, and it's decided to put a levy out to the voters, for that levy to pass, it wouldn't be 50% plus 1, it would be 60% now as a threshold. Matt, did you want to add anything for?
It's hard to quantify all this, because even in the Senate version, in response to House Bill 96, they have a proposal that says that 2/3 of the Board of Education would even have to approve a levy to even go on the ballot. And we know that there is no 2/3. It would have to be 4/5, it'd have to be 80%, so. In addition, there's concerns that people don't understand their tax bills. School districts aren't transparent enough when they do go for the levy, and they don't really know who their board members are, which is why you see recommendations for, in some of your other proposals, to have political affiliation designated with board members. That way they know who they're voting for by the letter after their name. So, yeah, it's just, you take that and you take House Bill 96. It's a triple threat for sure. You know, claiming that they want more transparency, accountability, and the will of the people. That's what the lawmakers are saying, but you're doing all that while you're increasing privatized education reform, in which there is less transparency, less accountability, and less will of the people. So it's, and then when we push back, we're accused of being greedy, which is, you know, when we went down and we did testimony 2 weeks ago, we advocated against a one-size-fits-all reform because every district has very unique circumstances, and certainly we have that unique circumstance here. We spelled that out through written testimony. We spelled it out through verbal testimony. And while the Senate version of the budget bill was slightly friendlier than the House version, it still does not meet all of our needs. And then when you throw, and again, these are all, you know, so let's be level-headed here. These are all proposed. Nothing is in law. We don't need to, you know, overreact at this point. But I think this is all pointing to, no matter what happens through this budget cycle, there's going to be a very different funding model on the other side of this when this biennium expires. And I think people need to understand that what they have, what the memories and the values and expectations they hold in mind for what their public school is, has been, and what they want it to be, may not be possible if things continue down this path. We feel like we have really solid plans in place that have mitigated a lot of these factors, that have buffers built in, but there's only so many buffers you can take before you have to do some of the things that we are hearing from our organizations that may happen to public schools across Ohio. It's a one lobbyist the other day said, in public education, we are in the fight of our life. These are unprecedented times. It's never, ever happened before to this extreme in public education. And, you know, we're just going to have to see what shakes out in the next, we know the omnibus bill from the Senate comes out on Friday. Then there'll be 2 weeks that they will make amendments and vote for a version that goes to the governor on the 25th. And some of these things like 355 and 335 that you just mentioned right now are outside of the budget bill. These are operating out here. So even if they don't get wrapped into the budget bill, or they are rejected, that doesn't mean they can't independently still gain traction. So, and there are so many other things we're not focusing on. It's almost like, and I hate to be long-winded here, we're going to cut the fair school funding plan, and everybody advocated against that, and so they introduced something that was worse, the cash carryover. And all of a sudden, we didn't complain as much about the fair school funding plan because we were worried about the cash carryover balance. And then they bring out, well, we're going to propose over here elimination of the inside millage. Well, that looks worse than the cash carryover cap. And then we're going to say, oh, and by the way, when you do run out of money and you have to levy it, you're going to need 2/3 vote of the board, and you're going to need a 60% approval rating, not 50 plus one, like an election of a political figure, but a 60% threshold. So, and then all of a sudden, that makes those other things. It's let's see how bad we can absolutely make it so that you end up begging for the less lethal dose of poison. But it's still poison to public schools. It's a
Right.
fact.
Are there
Facts.
any other states that you know of that have funding similar to what the state of Ohio is about to
So-
propose, which is none?
So there's a, I'm not going to mention the website, but I met with House of Representative member last Friday who showed us a site that seems to be inspiration for some states across the country, and Ohio is following suit. So if you want to see a good example, maybe check out Louisiana. I hear they have stellar educational institutions there, and things are working swimmingly in Louisiana. No offense to our friends in Louisiana, but you want to check there. You want to check Texas, a few other Midwestern states. So I can get you more information if you want a more specific list, but I can show you the website I was referring to later, but I'm not going to mention it
Okay. All right. thank
right
you.
now.
I'll keep going. So, I have so as we're moving down to letter D, and again, just to recap, those are two new provisions that came out. So HB 335 basically takes away inside millage, which for us is approximately $2 million. And then HB 355 would then increase the threshold for the passage of a voted tax from 50% to 60% now. We'll move down to letter D, which is HB 96, that's our cap. What I have is a copy of our 5-year forecast for everybody here. And for this forecast, we have a couple numbers that are boxed and colored. So our first one is yellow, and that's $4 million. So what that would do, and let me set it up before we go to that yellow number. Let's look in the fiscal 24 column, and we see an orange and we see a blue. So when we take those two numbers and we divide the blue into the orange, we get 97.6, and that is our ending balance, our share of general fund expenditures in fiscal 24. So that 97.6% that we have there, what the state's doing is they're saying you have to have that be your ending cash at under 50%. So then we're going to have to look to fiscal 25, and if we're at 97.6, we have to get ours down to 50%, or anything else gets given back to the taxpayers in the form of a credit. So when we shift over a whole column to 2025, we essentially hit that mark. So when we do the same division of 11,940,000 in red by our purple 24,380,000, we get to under 50%. Now, in order to do that, we would have to, in yellow, that box up there with the 4 million, transfer money from the general fund to the permanent improvement fund. And that's assuming all these numbers in the 5-year forecast pan out. So that's why we're talking approximates. It could be a little higher at the end of the day.
Is it something you could do, you would be allowed to do?
Yep.
To transfer $4 million from the general fund to the permanent improvement?
We have a couple options that we could use. The permanent improvement fund could be an avenue that we choose to do it. There are other funds, 035 for severance payments that, have historically always been made from the general fund, virtually for every school district in the state. or 070, which is capital projects, and you can designate money for certain capital projects that take place. A couple board meetings ago, we recapped our capital improvement plan that we have in place, and we know that there are a lot of needs with an approximately 90-year-old building, really highlighting the roof, HVAC, and parking lots. That $4 million can really go to fill those needs that we have. The state's essentially saying you have to come in under this cap that they have instead of just us naturally going through the course of operations, and we would naturally move it over in time and then tackle that. So the state's essentially kind of forcing our hand with this artificial cap at the moment. So our,
One question here, would they also put any type of time limit on when to do those projects? If you're moving this money, does it?
not in the permanent improvement fund, not from what I've seen. If we were to keep it in the general fund, they have you earmark it for 3 years. And if you don't accomplish those projects in 3 years by essentially encumbering or earmarking those funds in the general fund, the 4th year, it all goes back as a credit. So you have 3 years to use it. So that's why we wouldn't want to keep it in the general fund, because we're kind of on the clock at that point.
Yeah.
But moving it over from general fund to permanent improvement, or, the 070, the capital projects fund, it drops our balance in the general fund by the $4 million.
Yeah.
Now, keep in mind, years 4 and 5 in the forecast are grayed out, because they want to take it from a 5-year forecast to a 3-year forecast. So we would see our ending numbers are positive for year 1, 2025, year 2, 2026, and year 3, 2027. They're grayed out for 2028 and 29. By transferring money over from our general fund, we would then go negative in our 5th year, so we would have to target a levy maybe in calendar year 2027. But that's all just kind of guesstimates, but it's a rough plan at this point in time. But again, we can't sit at our 97.6. We have to get down to under 50% by either transfer or a give back in the form of credits. But we will not be able to be above 50% as it still stands.
Yeah, so a couple things here. When we passed the last levy, we debated on what the ratio should be. We went 1 and 7, 1 mil PI, 7 general fund for operating purposes, with the communication and understanding that if we had to move more money for permanent improvements from the general to PI, we had the ability to do that. Whereas if we had fixed ourselves at, let's say, 4 and 4, that 4 going to the PI could only stay in PI. So that brings me to my second point, is that 4 million goes to PI. It is only for PI. It can never, well, I shouldn't say never, nothing's ever impossible. It's virtually impossible to make it go back to the general fund. So it would be in PI without any time limits that we're aware of. The other thing that's tricky about this is we don't know exactly what the percentage is going to be. It did, the Senate's version increased to 50%, which was up from the 30% that the House approved. It could stay at 50, it could go above 50, or it could go even further below. It could go closer to the 30. It could be somewhere in between, not exactly in the middle. So we don't know exactly where that's going to land until probably June 25th, which is your next board meeting, right? Well, next regularly scheduled meeting. You have a special meeting on the 18th, I believe. So we're going to be watching this closely, because this money would have to get transferred out in this fiscal year. You have till June 30th to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to know that number definitively. You're just going to be understanding what that number is on the next board meeting, regular meeting on the 25th. So there may be the need for a special meeting on the 30th, which is a Monday, in order to make that transfer happen. And again, it was
Isn't that almost too late? That's the last step.
still counts as the fiscal year, and it's we have checked, it is permissible. Other districts have done it without knowing exactly what the number is. All right? So we're trying to be as prudent as possible, making the most informed decision as possible. This was part of our communication when we passed the levy that should we need to move money into PI accounts, we could move more. We do have capital improvement projects that we spelled out over really the next 10 to 15 years. So it all falls in line, and yes, remember 2027 is fiscal year 28, and if you look at Mr. Muccio's forecast, it shows we're out of money going into fiscal 29. So the reasoning of the lawmakers, and it's not exactly out of left field, is that rather than asking for, let's just say, an 8 mil levy at one time, gradually ask for it. Ask for 2.5 or 3 here. 3 years later, ask for 2 or 3 more. 2 or 3, ask for 2 or 3 more. That way, it's not a large property tax increase at one time. You may get it once every 3 years in smaller doses to land where you would later on. It does throw you off your levy cycles. And we would have to do a lot of communication around that this is what Columbus wants for you. You may not be used to it, but it's going to be smaller doses, more digestible doses, as opposed to larger ones. So you can understand a little bit about where the thought process is there. The flip side of that is we have been on 10 and 12-year cycles, which is really good for people once you get used to that fixed income, you know that we're not going to be asking for any more levies for a decade, and there's some stability in that. You also aren't going to have necessarily the flexibility if you have big shifts or changes. So you do this, and then there's a elimination of inside millage. How are you going to adjust for that? All right, you get there's your So, but that $4 million, it was already going. If you don't move it, you're going to. I don't want to say you're going to lose it, and still come back and ask for the money back. But at least in this way. There's at least part of a plan that keeps Cuyahoga Heights schools at the standard that we're used to having, which is what we've been working a lot on.
We feel we've devised a plan that fits in with everything that they're throwing out there as far as HB 96, and it's a reasonable plan that we can accomplish all of our as we know today, a lot of those capital improvement projects that, we were waiting to do more naturally just, on our own timeline, but, accelerate that a bit and have that be done. But where it really gets tricky is, again, we've game planned HB 96, but just imagine if HB 335 and HB 355 go through. If HB 335 does, just think about our very, very top line, general property taxes, 1.010. Imagine if $2 million was taken from that number up there and what that would do to our bottom line. And then think, if we put any levy out there in the future, that levy, according to HB 355, would have to pass not by 50%, but now by 60%. How would we operate as a school district? It essentially puts us in a, as well as any school district out there.
Not just us,
Right. It's everybody grouped together.
it's everybody,
Well, I have
cities, towns, and villages too.
So, I'm trying to follow this, and their reasoning being that they want to give back to the property tax, like in a credit, is what you said, but then it's going to make the school districts have to ask for more money in property taxes, in different levies? That seems counterproductive to me, like, it doesn't make sense. You wanna take it from one pocket and then put it into the other pocket, but take it out again? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And I need clarification, what is the difference between permanent fund and capital improvement projects? Because they're.
It's essentially the same thing.
Okay.
Right. Yep.
But use the permanent fund to pay for capital improvement.
Talk about the difference between the PI account and a 070 account.
Yeah, there are some
You were
different,
saying before, you had moved it from the general fund
Right.
to one of three, and you said permanent improvement, which we already have the levy money going into. And then
Right.
you said severance
Yep.
pay, and then you said capital projects.
Yep.
And that seems to be where we've been talking,
Right.
you know, about.
Yeah,
Right.
there's a special general fund account, so
So even more specific than permanent improvement.
Permanent improvement goes to PI and it can't come back to your general fund, but there is a special general fund account you can create called a 070 account, that you can put that money there, and you have a finite period of time, like, is
Right.
it about a 10-year period or so
Yeah.
to spend it? Go ahead, you
Yeah.
explain it, you're the treasurer.
So I always like to keep it simple. It's kind of like a golf score, right? You know, the lower the better, so you don't want to complicate things. You know, we were trying to keep everything very simple. You know, general fund, you know, that's kind of our main operating. And then we branched off and have our permanent improvement fund. So money designated for, you know, capital, permanent improvements, one and the same tomato. Really because we have a 90-year-old facility and, you know, the BEST committee did a lot of great work devising that. So that's one option. It goes to the permanent improvement fund. You really can't back it out. It's a one-way street. So the money stays there and you know, fulfill all those capital improvement plan projects that we've mapped out, and more are going to be coming on the way. There's the 035 fund, which we don't have that fund, but we could establish it, and you could move money from the general fund, which is 001, to the 035 fund to pay severance. So we pay severance for retirement from general fund. Essentially, everybody does. This fund exists for paying severance. So some schools are looking at that fund and saying, well, we're going to transfer some of our money from general fund over to that severance fund, just to get it out of general fund, because
Right.
that's where the cap is.
Right.
The 070, and we can talk more about this at a future board meeting too, but to summarize that fund, it's the same way as a permanent improvement fund for capital projects, but you have the ability, I guess in cases of emergency, to move that money from 070 back to the general fund. But then you're moving a lot of money every which way, and that gives kind of the impression that, you know, you're starting to play that shell game when you start bouncing.
Yeah, but then you're also putting it into the fund where the state could take it too.
N-
And that was the whole purpose of not.
Yeah, they can, well, it seems like the general fund's the only one that the state's kind of eyeballing.
Right.
The other funds, they aren't. So the 070, you can kind of maneuver the money around, but then you start getting into that, you know, why are you moving money? If you designated it for that, why are you not keeping it there? I understand the argument, if there's an emergency, you can move it back, but it has to, you know, really be an emergency in case of that.
With so many
Right,
things that need to be done, we have a whole list of things that need to be done.
right.
And we're, you know, working on them right now, for
Right.
example, like a
Right.
few at a time.
Right, and that's why, right, if we were to transfer 4 million approximately over from the general fund to the permanent improvement fund, we could, you know, accomplish grander scale of those projects. The roofing, we could re-roof the whole school, half and half perhaps. So there's you know, we have a lot of options available, but, you know, where it gets kind of tricky and you want to kind of be, you know, mindful of your own destiny or in charge of your own destiny is we're taking it from the general fund. If you don't have a general fund, you don't have a school.
Yeah.
So that's our operating fund. So that's why, you know, I'm always kind of hesitant to take it from the general fund because you never know what's going to happen. And, you know, that without that, you could have a school, but you have nothing inside the school because you can't fund it. Which there have been examples in Ohio where that has happened. So schools get in trouble with that. But, yeah, none of these options are good, but we're just, you know, planning ahead for what we see. But, you know, really, we can devise a plan for HB 96, but HB 335, you know, when they're taking inside millage and then, you know, combining that with HB 355, I mean, that's almost, I think for any school, too much to overcome. In the long term. You know, maybe in the short term you can overcome some of that, but I think eventually it catches up with you.
We're gonna do all three.
Yeah. So it's, I think right now, I agree with Matt. Did you say we're just in survival mode at the moment?
Yeah, and we just got an email that the omnibus version has been released, so we'll have to sift through that. Are we in survival mode? I don't think we're in survival mode yet. I think we're aware that we might have to initiate that plan, but yeah,
It's close.
I feel like we're in good shape for 2 years. I think we're in really good. I think we're going to be in good shape to get us to the next, whatever the next version of public ed looks like. I think we're going to arrive there healthy, which I think is a great place to be, because I think any school that can sit there and say, in 2 years, we can arrive at the door of whatever the next version is going to look like, healthy, student-focused, without reductions in programs. But it doesn't mean that we don't have to be preparing that that's what is going to have to happen on the other side of that. But I don't think we're going to be unique there. I think that's going to be just the reality of every school district in 2 years. And I think we're going to be able to maintain the excellence everybody has expected for the next 2 years. Feel really good about that. But it's going to have to come with movement, and collaborations, and a lot of communication, preparing for what's on the other side of that cliff. And I think that has us in better standing than most.
Yeah.
Correct?
Oh, I agree.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Yeah, so it's,
So a couple things for both Mr. Muccio and Mr. Young. One, I couldn't agree more that part of this dynamic is the increased need for even more robust communications with all of our stakeholders, and we can define that any way we want. So kudos to you for already picking up on the ostensibly on the need for improved and greater additional communications to everybody who needs to understand how much we don't and haven't had a say in this matter that's being laid at our doorstep. The other thing I wanted to point out is in the bullet points for the HB 96 discussion, there's a very succinct chronology of the actions that our administrative team has done to try and just highlight our concerns with the HB 96, in particular the cash carryover balance proposal. And I've said this before, but I do publicly want to thank you both and the rest of your team for having the commitment to seeing this process through and for trying to act on behalf of our students, our staff, and our communities. We are all better served because of the work that you guys did, so thank you.
thank you. You're welcome. Very welcome.
Yeah, and thanks for putting this together. I think it's helpful to see, understanding that the numbers, they change and they look a little bit different, but if there is a need for us to take an action by the end of the month, to have this in front of us now is super helpful.
Right.
I do just want to emphasize, Mr. Young talked about, we went back and forth of how much you put in the PI up front. We made a decision based on our local needs of how we wanted to do that, and I think it's just really unfortunate that our hand is potentially going to be forced by people that don't understand, that are not local, that are not our taxpayers, of how we are going to manage our money, and that then we're the ones that have to go back in front of the voters. Cash, again, I think I said this before, is flexibility. They are taking away our flexibility. And that is intentional, and I think, that should alarm people, because if they're willing to do that to us, what else are they willing to do? And I think the 60% passage is also alarming. Even if you are anti-public school or anti-tax, majority rules is democracy. So that should alarm you, because they're not gonna stop at tax levies, I can tell you that. And
Yeah.
I think we're gonna be in a lot of trouble in particular, but it's I don't know, not good.
Yeah, there's a couple things. I included a spreadsheet to complement what Mr. Muccio had put together for you. This shows all three budget versions when it comes to state funding. So when they talk about a fair school funding plan, or the elimination of a fair school funding plan, or a substitute plan, what's the ramifications for school districts? What I have done, the first sheet, this just shows the top 20 lowest in funding by the state. The Senate version would give us $2.25 million over the biennium. That is the fourth lowest. We went from third lowest to fourth lowest, so Danbury displaced us for number 3, so good for Danbury. They get less than we do.
Half of our student enrollment.
But you see, right after us is Independence. So you've got these two tiny little successful school districts are sitting there with the two of the top 5 lowest state funding totals. Independence will be 2.8 million over the biennium, but when you compare the numbers, that is greater than the House version and the governor's version. So, you know, while it's not a lot, we are grateful for it. You know, we're grateful to get an increase, whatever that was going to be. And then you can see where we rank in the county. If you go to the second page that I gave you, it takes those same numbers and it only looks at Cuyahoga County. We do receive the lowest in all of Cuyahoga County. Next is Independence, next is Richmond Heights. So, you know, the 3 tiniest districts, 7, 12, 9, so it would make sense to some degree that you would get the least, maybe the least amount, but,
I'm confused because
yep.
it says 712, that would be like the amount of money per student.
That's your daily, that's your ADM, so they are counting. Remember,
head count.
how they come up with the ADM isn't how many kids are in your school, it's the percentage of time that they spend in your school. So a child who goes to the
Oh.
Career Center does not count as a full child for us, therefore we don't receive the full funding for that
Oh,
child.
okay, so that's the number of students per, how they're calculating it,
Ye-
okay.
Yes,
And
so
then
that's
this-
right.
So these numbers,
So then when you look at the first column, that was our fiscal 25, so that would be the 2024 amount. All right, 24, 25 amount, so the fiscal 25 was how much we were earmarked to get this year.
okay,
All right, in the executive version, that would have gone from 836,972 to $953,962 next year. If you go over 2 columns, the House reduced that amount to $909,703. So the House amount for next year was approximately $40,000 less than what the governor had recommended. But then if you go 2 more columns over, you'll see the estimated Senate version goes to $1,043,872. So you see that is a significant increase, in my opinion, from what we would have gotten compared to last year. It's higher than what the governor proposed, and it's, you know, it's $100,000 more than what the House proposed.
well, this article that was in Sunday's paper, same thing, it talked all about this. Yeah, but in here, they made it look like the governor's proposal would give us more. Here they had it, the Senate version, 1.1 million, just over $1 million, and then the House version, was under $1 million. But then they said that DeWine's version was similar to the, almost exactly with the Senate version, but then the second year was more. They had the DeWine's proposal and the Senate proposal being almost identical, but the
They're-
House being less.
The House was much less.
Yeah,
The governor's version would have put approximately $2 million to Cuyahoga Heights schools. The Senate version gives us about $250,000, $206,000 more than the House. I don't have the exact.
Yeah.
It says, yeah. So the Senate version was $89,909 higher in fiscal 26 and $88,127. So it's very similar to the
governor.
governor.
Yeah, I know,
Uh,
I noticed
Still
that.
$150,000 more than what the governor had proposed, so that's significant. I mean, we'll take it, right?
Yeah.
We'll definitely take it. So, yeah, so that does help support the point that Mr. Muccio had made there. I was going to say something else. I'll remember it later.
And then also pointing out,
Sorry to have distracted you.
No, it's all good.
Because I saw this article is exactly what you were talking about, you know, and they showed the other schools in Cuyahoga County as well. It could hardly make sense of what they were talking about. You know,
and also,
you know, one lump sum, 8.1 billion in foundation aid, and then this is how they broke it up.
and then also too, to add in for HB 96. Mr. Young and myself, we met with our legal counsel earlier this week. I had 10 questions prepared, just going through, and a lot of the questions were devised by reading the current version as pending in the Senate Finance Committee. This is page 4,422 of the bill. So, a couple of my questions were just, there's no limits on transfers from the general fund to the permanent improvement fund. That was important. We wanted to know that. When you read the language that they have here, they talk about the county budget commission. They shall convene on or before the 15th day of August to review certifications from each school district to determine the amount of carryover balance in the district's general operating budget from the preceding fiscal year. So when I'm really starting to go through it, the 15th day of August, that's within the 90-day window of the bill. So if it's signed 6:30 by DeWine, it usually takes 90 days before it goes into effect, and 90 days would lead us to September. So I'm not sure how they would have a meeting in the 15th of August to do this if it doesn't go into effect.
Unless
in
there's
September.
emergency provisions within the bill that
So-
make it go into effect immediately.
Yeah, so that was one question I had. We really didn't know. They would review certifications. So right now, and I have, as my item 7A, everything that the Budget Commission is going to ask for from us. And if we look at what that is, they ask for final revisions of revenues and appropriations for fiscal year '25. They ask for our beginning unencumbered fund balance, and revisions to estimated revenue. And then they ask for temporary or annual appropriations for the next year. But nothing talks about what your ending expenditure number is. So I'm not quite sure how they're going to be able to calculate what amount gets us to the 50% at that August 15th meeting, because they're not asking for the right numbers. They're not asking for your total expenditures in any of that. So maybe a new document comes out from this, but again, is that within that 90-day window or outside of the 90-day window when it goes into effect? Then they also talk about the general operating budget. And I did ask legal counsel, when they say general operating budget, is that the general fund? And they didn't know. It doesn't clearly define it. So I'm not sure what general operating budget means, if it's general fund, athletic fund, and food service fund, or just general fund. So he wasn't sure when we were looking. We were also trying to make sense of the preceding fiscal year. So if they are meeting August 15th, that would be in fiscal year '26, and looking back at the preceding fiscal year would be fiscal year '25. So if we end fiscal year '25 under 50%, we meet that standard, as we understand it. So we really went through the language with our legal counsel, really, peppering them with questions on even more than just that. So we're in contact, and we're going to have another meeting when we get closer to make our transfer. We're going to run everything by them before we make it. But just so everybody here knows that we're really trying to do our due diligence with the language that they have written, just to make sure, we're understanding it as best we can. And, we're even contacting other school districts and talking to them to see what they're doing. And other schools are moving forward with doing transfers right now. So some you're going to see from other schools in the next couple of weeks. I'm still the wait and see approach, but I don't want to wait too long. So, we'll kind of be towards the end of that with it. But we're very mindful, and we're watching this very intently.
So block out June 30, possibly.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I think that's the right thing to do.
Would it be something that would
I don't
have to
think
be
we
done
should move
earlier in
any
the
earlier
day,
than
like 10 o'clock in the morning, or, not at night like we normally meet? Right?
If you could.
To make sure
I think the
that,
question is, do we have to vote on it by June 30th, or do you have to hit the button to make the transfer by June 30th?
Well, the button, right, it would have to be voted on in June 30th is our understanding, because we can hit the button into July as long as the board action took place in
Got it.
June. So we don't close the books, nobody closes the books, a
July
minute
1st,
after,
yeah.
right. 7/1, all right, it's 12/01, we're hitting the button to close it.
Yeah.
It takes usually about a week or two into July to close the fiscal year, always
There are
has.
other
Okay with
things
that?
usually that are like pending.
Yes, yes. So it takes time to close. Whenever we see somebody close, within one day, we're like, come on, man, what do you, why is this person,
Show us up.
right? But it takes time. But accuracy over speed, so you're not looking to do it quickly, you're looking to do it accurately. But yeah, the thought is if we do it by 6:30, it falls within the fiscal year, we count it within the fiscal year, so if they are to look at it August 15th, you know, that is the preceding fiscal year from that date and time. As best we're understanding the language in front of us.
Yeah, well, the governor has to sign it on the 30th.
No, he can let it drift into, I think that happened a couple budget cycles ago when it did not get signed by the 30th.
Was that COVID related though?
It could have been.
Yeah. I mean, obviously why I'm asking you the question, because if he hadn't signed it, and he pulls it off because he has line item veto, then who knows where we are, and we will have already voted. So
No, with a
it's
super,
a risk no matter what we do.
with a super majority, I'm not sure it's
Yeah.
worth his time.
If it passes with a supermajority in the first place, it won't matter.
Is there any benefit to trying to have this board action, like, before June 30th?
There is the fear if everybody gets the flu and nobody can come June 30th, and then we don't have, so there's a
I
little
mean,
bit of that too, that.
Power outage, or,
Right.
you know, tornado comes through that
Right.
day.
Could be the Friday before that month.
I mean, I know you said you wouldn't know until August 25th. Excuse me, June 25th, yeah. But I don't know.
It's not ideal, and I think it's just one of those things we're gonna have to take each day.
Okay.
Because it's happening simultaneously.
Yeah, I
With the
know.
close of the fiscal year, and that's the tricky part for everybody in this situation. So it's almost one of those, you know, one day at a time.
And would there be any criticism or ridicule of, like, you just did this, like, you know, in the nick of time kind of thing? Like,
Well, I feel like we've been talking about this for 2 months now.
yeah.
Yeah, we just can't do
Would they say,
anything
would
until we
the
know.
And
state
as
say
you,
something to us?
no, I brought that up during the testimony. You know, they ask about why we haven't transferred any money, and I said quite honestly, we don't know what the number is. And there are no business rules behind what can and can't be transferred. And so we certainly don't want to be accused of moving money, you know, in secrecy. I said we like accountability, we like transparency, and we want to make sure that we do that for our community. But if the provision is there, it's there. So places like us, who's again number 600 out of 610 on the OFCC list to receive funding from the state to renovate or replace our buildings, we will never receive funding from the state for capital improvements. It's not ever going to happen. Those that we get from grants are small safety grants that we do to upgrade cameras and maybe enhance our entrances and things like that, but it's nothing that's going to be of any substance to fix your roofs or your asphalt
And that
or.
gives more credence to putting it into the capital projects fund. But we're never gonna get the funds from the state to do these big projects. And we have to find the funds to do them somewhere.
And so what do? You control your own destiny.
Right.
You control your own fate. And we worked for an entire year with the BEST committee saying, what is the best option for our school? And this goes back 2 years ago. I remember standing in front of the BEST committee saying, do you know what public education looks like 10 years from now? When people started talking about bond issues. And we re-emphasized that this year, and we moved people off of the bond idea, and through a lot of work and great work by Matt here, we were able to have people actually participate in what moving money around through our permanent improvement accounts look like based on what we knew we were going to collect, what we know we're going to get PI designated over the next 15 years. And it worked. But if they're going to tinker with that, then we have to, and the provision is there. It's a little bit of a, I don't know, going from 30 to 50 helps. Having a provision to move it into or designate for capital accounts, that helps. They even put in a little bit, like in the school funding piece, 4- and 5-star school districts get a little bit of a percentage increase in your funding based on your student population and being a 4- and 5-star overall district. Okay, we'll take that. I mean, it's not a lot, but thank you for recognizing the hard work that we're doing and the accomplishments our kids are making as a result of what's going on in the classrooms. So,
And another thing to kind of make it even trickier is, so if we look at that yellow highlighted $4 million number, if we go just, on top of it, we look at, our capital outlay and our supplies and materials and our purchase services. We don't close the fiscal year, 1 minute into 7/1, July 1st. So we're still paying bills within those 2 weeks and closing out purchase orders. So those numbers shift. So we don't have hard numbers. So we're essentially making a transfer to come in under a percentage with numbers that are moving. So I'm gonna have to overshoot on it to get us under whatever ultimate number we're looking at, if it's 50. So, and we don't even know the number, because that's still moving. So we have a lot of moving parts in this equation.
Well, the other thing too, this comes at a time when, all those reevaluations were done and the, increase in taxes, everybody felt that. So here's the state going, well, people are so upset about the increases in taxes. And it did have an effect on some people that maybe they couldn't pay, because you were showing us earlier at one of the other board meetings how our collection for our property taxes are lower than they were from prior years. So all of this is like dovetailing on it, one thing after another. And it just, just further complicating the situation.
And DeWine could be the wild card, where, you think you have the number and you're trying to close out and solidify the other numbers, and maybe he vetoed,
Yeah.
There's so many moving parts. It's really remarkable. It's all, how it is. It really is.
I mean, could all this be for naught if he then vetoes this H196? Or is there any likelihood that that would happen?
I don't think so.
And that's all I have.
Is that it?
Okay.
That's it?
You sure?
That's all for us to mull over tonight?
Okay, can we move on? First of all, I'd like the record to reflect that Ms. Etter came about 6:15. She arrived and joined the meeting. Okay, moving on to superintendent's business, section 8, 9, 10, 11. 8, 9, 10.
Okay. On the consent agenda, for recommendation for approval, I have 8A, 9A, 10A through E, and 11A through C.
Okay, we have a motion for those items, please.
So moved.
Ms. Sprouse?
Second?
Second by Mr. Dobbins. Discussion.
Okay, already working on next school year. So we've got 8A is the district building hours that are typically published on our website for the 25-26 school year. Number 9A, this is the official acceptance of the resignation of Ryan Kelber as our athletic director now that he is approved at Berea. We want to thank Ryan for his 7 years of service to the school district. He's done phenomenal things for our kids, our coaches, and our athletic programs, and I know he'll be successful over at Berea, so I wish him well. Next, we have employment, so we are renewing 4 contracts, and then we have a new hire. So we're recommending the reemployment of Logan Dietrich as an IT support specialist, 2-year limited contract, 25-26 and 26-27. Per the salary schedule and contract that I provided for you in the administrative content. Letter B is a recommendation for a 2-year contract for Scott Dietrich as the principal for our 6th through 12th grade, 25-26, 26-27, again, as included in his contract. Letter C, this is the reemployment of Pam Mead as our food service director, 2-year contract, exempt contract, 25-26 and 26-27 per the salary schedule and the continuing contract I attached there. Letter D is her sidekick, who does a great job, Wendy Jezanoski, as the food service manager, 2-year exempt contract, 25-26, 26-27. Again, the contract and the salary schedules there. Thanks, Mr. Muccio, for helping me with the salary schedules as we look to calibrate all of our exempt employees on a very similar schedule, so thanks for that help. Letter E is the employment of Joe Ellen Padal as an administrative assistant on a 1-year limited contract for the 25-26 school year. Step 1 of the Chase negotiated agreement, which is a 226-day contract contingent on successful completion of all background checks and proper certification. I included her application for you in the administrative content. Under number 11, we have the approval of the agreement with Northeast Ohio Network for Educational Technology, that's NeoNet. We are consulting, we have a 1 day per week consultant who's going to work with us and do a full technology audit for us, as it's been a while since we have an external audit of our systems. Work with our two amazing IT personnel to ensure that all of our technology needs are in line with everything from cybersecurity to equipment to purchase agreements and different legal requirements. So this is a 1 day per week consultant contract. We've had that for this school year, so this is a continuation for 1 more year so that we can come up with a long-term technology plan based on our needs. So Mr. Burek, Mr. Hartman, Mr. Dietrich will all be working with that consultant. Letter B, last meeting we approved for the 2025 district track meet. We went ahead and approved the pay rates for OHSAA playoff events all the way through next school year, and it shows the changes that have been recommended, actually required by the OHSAA. So we're just simply adopting that so that when we have our own workers, we can pay them properly. And then letter C, this is our administrative and supervisory exempt classified employee schedule of benefits that has been updated. Mr. Muccio and I worked on it. Mr. Muccio did a lot of the heavy lifting on that. When you click on that particular document, you'll see highlighted in yellow the major changes. We're getting some things in line with, you try to get different classifications in line with the proper negotiated agreements. We don't have a bargaining unit as exempt employees, but certain benefits parallel one another. So things like career increments and the using clock hours to get various salary bumps for certain groups, FMLA and parental leave, merit incentive for perfect attendance, just for certain groups. So as you review this, Group 1, those are your typical administrators like myself, Mr. Muccio, Mr. Burek, our principals. Then you've got Group 2 employees. Those are like your supervisors, your coordinators, and your specialists. So you think of Mr. Hartman, you think of Mr. Dietrich, Ms. Mead, Mrs. Jezanowski. Those are examples, and Mr. Zerbola. Those are examples of supervisors, coordinators, and specialists. And then you've got Group 3, which are school support personnel. You see that in your treasurer's office with Mrs. Martin, Mrs. Rodriguez, and then in my office with Mrs. Deal. So, and then Group 4 are hourly exempt positions, which we don't have any of those. But should we ever have the need for it? So for example, if you wanted to have an administrator go out, rather than doing what we did with Mr. Kiefer and put him on a contract, you could do an hourly type position instead. That would be a Group 4. So that's just a modified schedule of benefits for your exempt employees. And if I didn't miss any sections, I believe that's all I have for the consent agenda.
Okay. Any questions or further discussion? Hearing none, Treasurer, please call the roll.
Ms. Prowse.
Aye.
Mr. Dobbins.
Aye.
Mrs. Etter.
Aye.
Mr. Souchaki.
Aye, motion passes 4-0. Section 12, Section 13, Superintendent discussion.
Yeah, just
comments.
a few things. First, I want to congratulate our 4x200 meter relay team at the state meet last week. Gavin Chamberlain, Devin Diezik, Tristan West, and Nick Armbrust. They took the bronze medal in Division III in that particular event and set a school record in the process. I know Coach Schaefer and his staff have done amazingly. We also had a high jumper qualify in a 4x1 relay team, but we were well represented down there. But it was great to see that group get on the podium and got the bronze medal, so congratulations to them. Projects, and more projects. This week we saw 2 start. We've got the Lamar digital sign project started. They were here with a bulldozer going down and leveling the path and leveling kind of clearing out some brush in the lower area down there, preparing for Have you seen the 90 truckloads of gravel yet, Mr. Burek? Haven't seen them, haven't heard them, but they're supposed to be coming this week, and this week's getting close to being over. So I think tomorrow and Friday might be busy on that hillside there. So that work started. In addition, the fire alarm project started. If you walk through the hallways, you're going to see a lot of equipment out in the hallways. Einheit has been out. They've already started a lot of work. They're doing a fantastic job. Probably the cleanest crew you've ever seen. Whatever mess they make, they clean it up immediately. Really working hard, doing a great job so far. That project's going to continue all summer long, whereas the Lamar project is supposed to finish up at the end of next week. Rulin was out earlier this week doing a little bit of surveying, just doing some very, very subtle prep work with some personnel, but that project really kicks off on Monday of next week. Expected to finish up, I believe, the week of somewhere around like July 16th, I think. I don't know if that's a Monday, but that's a date that sticks in my head. Somewhere mid-July, they still think they're going to get both ends of that stadium hillside project secured. So those projects are going to be happening. Last week on Wednesday, there was the class of 2018 did the dedication of the Jacob Durbin monument that's out front underneath the flagpole. It was such a well-done event. And it was great to see. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they did a really great job of working with the family to capture his essence. It's out there on the front lawn. We have two other students that are on the front property. So it's great that their classmates have all recognized them. 200 people showed up for that. Again, it was very well done, and it's a monument for people to continue to visit, as they have for a couple of our other students over the years. So it's a great tribute to him. As a reminder, I will be out the week of June 23rd for vacation for 1 week. Mr. Burek's going to cover me on June 25th. I will still be following everything, with any budget amendments that happen along the way. We'll be emailing still, even, I'll get up at 4 in the morning so my wife doesn't see me doing that on vacation, just so we can be ready to go, because if we do have to have a meeting, if you do something at the end of that week, that's great. I won't be there, and I don't think you're there either at the end of that week. So he leaves. You'll be there on the 26th and 27th? Okay. So if you needed to do something later in that week, Mr. Burek could fill in for me again, but I'll be back for sure on the 30th should we need to do a meeting. Okay. So yeah, those are just a few comments. It's our students, our staff had a fantastic year overall. They've definitely earned their time away for the summer, and I wish everybody just the best summer with friends, family, fun, responsible fun. As I always tell my students, but yeah, they've earned it. So have fun out there.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to section 14, we have a resolution opposing the cash carryover balance provisions in House Bill 96. I'll make a motion for that. May I have a second, please? Second by Ms. Prowse. Discussion.
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in here.
I have copies if you want to.
Yeah, so I wanted to thank Mr. Muccio for helping us, the board, get this ball rolling. I do appreciate it. And in that regard, he and I, and then Mr. Sajaki and I spoke yesterday, and one of the things that came up is the merit, if any, of postponing action on this particular resolution or adopting it in its current form with the idea that it might be supplemented by the time of our next meeting, which is June 25th. That basically we might end up looking at or considering two separate, I don't want to say two separate, but two very much related resolutions. One would have a little more quantitative effects, the latter resolution later on this month, as opposed to the current one. But I fully support, and I very much appreciate Mr. Muccio's helping us get to this point.
Yeah, after Mr. Dobbs and I talked yesterday on the phone, to even plan on a second one for that June 30th meeting, where we cite
here is what has happened, here's how it is affecting us, we oppose it. I think it's a good idea, so.
Well, and also, in light of the conversation we had tonight, there is so much going on that this almost seems post-dated, a little bit dated or stale, because there's been so much happen just
Right.
in 355 and 335 that you summarized tonight. Those are very significant items in and of themselves. So
Well, if we need to, if something comes up over the next few days and we want to create a second resolution, we do have a board meeting scheduled for next week. We could add that business to the front of that meeting.
We know what to say by then.
We won't know, we may not know anymore, that's why I wouldn't plan it, but if we need to, we could throw that in.
Yeah.
And I don't think we have to publish anything like that, do we? As part of the meeting? I don't know.
I could always do it just to be safe, maybe, but I don't think so.
Yeah, because we already scheduled the meeting.
Yep.
And it's essentially an executive session. We just have to add a public session to the front of it.
Yep.
So we could certainly do that if we felt it was important.
Yep. And you can let me know too.
Yeah.
if that-
But it's hard to imagine what else would come up, but
Yep.
they've been really testing us lately, so
Yep.
who knows? Who knows? Okay, so anyhow, any discussion on this resolution? Any further discussion on the resolution?
I thank you guys all for
Yes.
putting this together on our behalf.
Yes, well done, thank you for helping us out. Okay, so I guess we move to a vote on the resolution.
Mr. Souchaki,
Aye?
Mr. Dobbins,
aye.
Mrs. Etter,
Aye.
Ms. Prowse.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. 15, board discussion, comments, and committee reports. Do we have any items? Quiet week for that sort of stuff. Section 16, future agenda items. I think we've already talked about some of that in our regular meeting, or earlier in the meeting, I should say. 17A, as it should be noted, Board of Education members receive their agendas several days prior to the actual meeting unless they have had an opportunity to study and ask questions and so on. Upcoming board meetings, a special meeting on June 18th at 6 p.m., regular meeting on the 25th at 7, regular meeting on the July 16th at 7, and a work session on August 6th
Are
at
we
6.
keeping the times at 7, regular meetings at 7? I thought in the summertime we changed them to 6.
We did, yeah, maybe we did talk.
Haven't we done that in the past, the summer meetings, we've changed to 6?
Yeah. Mainly for your benefit, gentlemen. I mean, you know, it shortens your day.
What do you guys?
Yeah.
Cool with anything.
I'm fine with 6 o'clock. That's,
Okay.
if you want to still do 7, we don't, usually, the reason why we did 7 o'clock was to accommodate students of the month.
Right,
And then those that obviously worked and wanted to get home and.
Yeah.
but if 6 works, 6 works okay? All right, let's make them all at 6 then, thank you.
There wasn't a reason for Jen, was there? Jen Deca, did she have a reason?
I don't think so.
To have it
Probably
later?
not concern me. Usually it's because of student activities, but she's not gonna be here, I believe.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that, but you're right. We changed them to 6 during the summer because we did not have students of the month.
For discussion, whatever you guys decide. Just helps me out if I know, if I can be on time.
Okay, is any other discussion come before the board this evening? If not, I'll accept a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Dobbins,
Second.
second by Ms. Proust. Any discussion? Hearing none, treasurer, please call the roll.
Mr. Dobbins.
Aye.
Ms. Prowse.
Aye.
Mrs. Etter.
Aye.
Mr. Souchaki.
Aye, motion passes 4-0. It is 7:14 PM, and we are adjourned. Oh, shoot, I did forget one thing. Could all of you, I mean, we don't need to discuss it, I don't think we need a formal discussion. Could each of you create a copy of the evaluations? Put comments in it, your own copy, send it to me. I'll put all of them together, so when we sit down next week, we can say, I can say, here are all the comments we've already written as a group, And I won't, all, it's,
Save it as, and save it to your desktop,
yeah,
and then attach it to the email.
right, save as a different name.
I don't work in those documents ever.
Yeah.
Ever, ever, ever.
You
I
don't,
don't know if I know how to do what you're asking me to do.
Well, then if you can't, then you can also just type up your notes in email
that would work.
by topic and just send it to you.
You could do that, and I'll paste them in for you. And I do not intend to identify anybody by their comments, I'll just include them. Do be conscious of how long those blocks are, though. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. And that's the whole point. That we can all contribute, and the meeting can move forward.